The helicopter was already lifting when the first shot cracked the night. Dust exploded across the landing zone. Rotor wash screamed. Shadows ran where shadows should not move. Sergeant Daniel Mercer was still on the ground. He sprinted, boots sinking into loose dirt, lungs burning. The bird rose higher. Too fast. Too soon. Someone shouted his call sign over the radio. Then static swallowed it. Another shot snapped past his head. Mercer dove behind a shattered wall as the helicopter disappeared into the black sky, its sound fading like a promise breaking. In seconds, the night closed in. He was alone. The mission had never been meant to go wrong. It started quiet. Too quiet. A moonless night, heavy with heat, the kind that pressed down on the chest. The team moved through broken terrain with disciplined silence, rifles low, eyes scanning every shadow. They were a small unit. Handpicked, trusted, sent to confirm the presence of a high-value enemy facilitator operating far from friendly lines. No flags, no names, no backup close enough to matter. In and out. That was the plan. Mercer had been in uniform long enough to know plans were fragile things. Still, he believed in this one. He believed in his team. They reached the objective just before dawn. A cluster of half-collapsed buildings clinging to a ridgeline. Abandoned, it seemed. Empty windows staring back like dead eyes. Intel said someone was there. Intel was right. The first sign wasn't gunfire. It was movement. A flicker behind a doorway. Then another. Too many. Too organized. Mercer felt it before he thought it. That cold slide down the spine. They were walking into a trap. The team split, covering angles, clearing rooms with practiced precision. Every step felt heavier than the last. Radios whispered updates in clipped bursts. Then the night detonated. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once. Muzzle flashes tore holes in the darkness. Concrete shattered. The air filled with dust and screams. Mercer returned fire, muscles moving on instinct. His world narrowed to sights, trigger, breath. He saw one of his teammates go down, spinning hard, disappearing behind rubble. Someone yelled for a medevac that would never come. Enemy fighters poured in, using the terrain, cutting off escape routes. The team fought to break contact, but the ridgeline turned against them. Every withdrawal step cost blood. Command crackled through the radio, strained and distant. Extraction was moved. Landing zone changed. Time compressed. Mercer covered the rear as they fell back. It was his job. He was good at it. Too good. A blast knocked him off his feet. The world rang. When he staggered up, his team was already moving, silhouettes racing downhill toward the new extraction point. He ran after them. That was when the shot took his leg. Pain exploded, white-hot, immediate. He collapsed, sliding into cover as rounds chewed the dirt where he'd been standing. He tried to stand. His leg didn't answer. He dragged himself behind the wall, breathing hard, fingers slick with blood. The radio was screaming now. Overlapping voices. Orders. Panic. Then the call came. LZ hot. 30 seconds. Mercer keyed his mic, voice raw. He gave his position. Again. Louder. No reply. He could hear the helicopter before he saw it. The sound was salvation. He forced himself up, ignoring the agony, pushing toward the clearing as the aircraft descended. Gunfire surged. The enemy sensed the moment. Mercer ran. He was 10 seconds away when the helicopter lifted early. The pilot had no choice. Incoming fire. Damage warnings. Lives on board. Mercer watched it rise, watched it turn, watched it vanish. The radio died. Silence rushed in. Now the night belonged to him. Mercer pressed himself into the dirt, heart pounding, counting breaths. The firefight moved away. Enemy fighters chasing the departing aircraft, convinced the prize had escaped. They hadn't noticed what was left behind. Yet, Mercer assessed himself the way he'd been trained. Leg wounded. Bleeding controlled. Barely. Limited ammo. No comms. No water. No team. Deep behind hostile territory. He swallowed hard. Fear crept in, slow and poisonous. Not fear of death. Fear of being forgotten. He waited until the sounds faded completely before moving. Every inch hurt. He crawled, dragged, stopped, listened. The stars overhead were sharp and indifferent. By dawn, he reached a shallow ravine choked with rocks and scrub. He collapsed there, breath ragged, vision swimming. He thought of his team. Wondered if they knew. Wondered if they believed he was dead. The thought cut deeper than the wound. The sun rose, brutal and unforgiving. Heat pressed down. Flies gathered. Mercer tore a strip from his sleeve, tightened the bandage, ignored the dizziness. He knew the rules. If you're left behind, you don't quit. You adapt. You survive. He began to move again, inch by inch, following terrain, staying low, avoiding open ground. Every sound made him freeze. Every shadow looked like a man with a rifle. By midday, he found water. Muddy. Stagnant. He drank anyway, gagging, forcing it down. As night returned, enemy patrols appeared. Voices. Laughter. Boots on rock. Mercer lay motionless as they passed within yards of him, sweat soaking his uniform, finger resting on the trigger. One mistake and it would be over. In the darkness, alone with pain and doubt, he made a decision. He would not wait to be rescued. He would move toward friendly lines, no matter the cost. Even if it killed him, the night swallowed him as he crawled forward, leaving a thin, dark trail behind. Each movement an act of will, each breath a promise he refused to break. The second night was colder. Mercer felt it seep into his bones as he dragged himself along the rocky slope, using his rifle like a crutch, teeth clenched to keep from making a sound. The wound in his leg throbbed with every heartbeat, a deep, angry pulse that reminded him of what one bad move would cost. He stopped often, listened, waited. The terrain dropped into a wide basin, open ground he couldn't cross until darkness thickened enough to hide him. From his position, he could see distant fires flickering like dying stars. Enemy camps. Too many to count. He lay there for hours, watching, memorizing patterns. Patrols moved in loose circles. Vehicles came and went. The enemy wasn't panicked. They were confident. That scared him more than gunfire ever could. When the moon dipped behind clouds, Mercer moved. Every crawl forward was slow, deliberate. Rocks cut into his palms. Dust filled his mouth. He kept his body low, feeling the ground with his forearms before shifting weight onto his leg. Pain threatened to take his breath away. He didn't let it. Halfway across the basin, a voice called out. Mercer froze. Boots scraped nearby. Two silhouettes appeared, walking casually, rifles slung loose. They were talking, laughing, close enough that Mercer could hear their breathing. He pressed his face into the dirt and became stone. The men stopped. One turned his head, scanning the darkness. A beam of light swept across the ground, past inches from Mercer's boot, then moved on. Seconds stretched into hours. Finally, they walked away. Mercer didn't move for a long time after that. When he did, it was slower than before, muscles trembling from the effort of staying still. By dawn, he reached a line of low hills. Cover. Shade. He collapsed beneath a cluster of rocks and passed out, the world narrowing to pain and heat, and a faint ringing in his ears. He dreamed of radio static. He woke to it. At first, he thought it was imagination. Then he realized the sound was real, faint, broken. Coming from his radio, Mercer fumbled for it, hands shaking. He adjusted the dial, heart hammering. Nothing. Then a whisper of a signal again. Too weak. Too far. He tapped the mic once, twice. No response. Still, it meant something. Friendly forces were out there. He wasn't completely invisible. The realization gave him a fragile burst of energy. He checked his compass, oriented himself, and chose a route that would keep him in rough terrain, even if it took longer. Time meant nothing now. Survival did. The third night brought rain. It came suddenly. A violent downpour that soaked him to the skin in minutes. The ground turned slick. The cold cut through him, making his legs stiff and useless. Mercer slid down a slope and slammed into a tree, stars exploding behind his eyes. He bit down hard, tasting blood. For a moment, he considered stopping, just for a minute, just to rest. The thought scared him. He forced himself to move again, dragging his body through mud and leaves, using the rain to mask his movement. The storm drowned out sound, turned the world into shadows and water. It also brought danger. Vehicles rolled along a nearby road, headlights slicing through the darkness. Mercer flattened himself as one slowed, engine rumbling, men shouting over the rain. A door opened. Light spilled out. Mercer held his breath. The vehicle stayed for a long moment, then drove on. When the road fell silent, Mercer crawled until his arms gave out. He lay there, chest heaving, rain mixing with sweat and blood. He laughed once. Quiet. Bitter. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. By morning, the rain was gone. So was his strength. Mercer's leg was swollen now, angry red creeping up his thigh. Infection. He knew the signs. He tore open a medical packet, cleaned the wound as best he could. Jaw locked as pain ripped through him. He whispered his team's names as he worked. Not prayers. Anchors. The fourth day tested him harder than the others. Enemy patrols increased. Helicopters swept low, searching. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance. Mercer stayed hidden, barely moving, rationing his strength. Hunger gnawed at him, sharp and constant. His vision blurred at the edges. He thought about home, about normal things. The smell of coffee, the sound of traffic, the weight of a quiet morning. Those thoughts hurt more than the wound. That night, he made a mistake. He moved too fast, crossing a narrow ravine. A rock shifted, clattered down the slope. Voices shouted immediately. Lights snapped on. Gunfire erupted, tearing through the brush. Mercer threw himself down, rolling as rounds cracked overhead. He fired back in controlled bursts, not to hit, but to break contact. He crawled blindly, heart pounding, bullets snapping past his head. One tore through his pack. Another punched into the dirt inches from his face. He slid into a culvert, water up to his chest, and went still. Boots thundered past. Shouts echoed. Flashlights probed the darkness. Mercer submerged himself, holding his breath, ignoring the fire in his lungs. He counted. Slowly. Calmly. The lights moved on. When he surfaced, shaking, gasping silently, something inside him shifted. Fear was still there. But it no longer ruled him. He wasn't running anymore. He was enduring. At dawn, he found high ground and saw it. A distant shape on the horizon. A ridgeline he recognized from mission briefings. Beyond it, friendly territory. Miles away. Mercer stared at it for a long time. Then he adjusted his grip on the rifle, leaned into the pain, and started moving again, one brutal step at a time, refusing to let the distance decide his fate. The fifth day broke without mercy. The sun rose hard and bright, burning away the thin morning fog and exposing everything it touched. Mercer lay pressed against the backside of a ridge, chest rising shallow, eyes locked on the horizon. The ridge he'd seen the day before was closer now. Still far, still unforgiving, but real. He pushed himself up and nearly blacked out. His legs screamed in protest. The swelling had spread. Every step sent a jolt through his body that rattled his teeth. He breathed through it, slow and controlled, the way he had been trained, the way he had taught others. Pain was information. Nothing more. He moved when the sun was highest, when most patrols sought shade. Crawling at first, then dragging. Then, when the ground allowed it, limping forward with grim determination. Hours passed in fragments. Heat shimmered. Dust clung to his skin. His throat burned. Water was gone. By mid-afternoon, the world began to blur. Mercer stumbled, caught himself, leaned against a rock that was too hot to touch. His vision tunneled, sounds warped, distant, like he was underwater. He slid down and sat there, head bowed, breathing hard. This was how it ended for a lot of men. Not with gunfire, with exhaustion, with the body giving up before the mind was ready. The thought crept in quietly. No one would blame you. He shut his eyes, just for a second. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw his team again. Their faces, the way they moved, the trust in their eyes when he covered their backs. He remembered the helicopter lifting. He remembered being left behind. Mercer opened his eyes. No. He whispered, the words scraping out of his throat. He pushed himself up again. The terrain ahead dropped sharply into a narrow valley, choked with trees and scrub. It offered cover, but it also funneled movement. A natural choke point. Dangerous. Necessary. Mercer descended slowly, every step calculated. Halfway down, he heard it. A low hum. Engines. He froze and eased himself behind a fallen tree. Through the branches, he saw them. A convoy. 3 vehicles. Armed men riding loose, scanning the hills. They were heading straight through the valley. Mercer's breathing slowed. His fingers tightened on the rifle. If they saw him, he wouldn't outrun them. He wouldn't outfight them. He waited. The vehicles rolled closer, engines growling, tires crunching over rock. Dust hung in the air, thick and choking. One vehicle slowed. Stopped. A man jumped out, stretching, lighting something. Smoke curled upward. Mercer pressed his cheek into the dirt and became invisible. Minutes dragged on. Sweat ran into his eyes. His leg throbbed in time with his pulse. Finally, the man climbed back in. The convoy moved on. When the sound faded, Mercer stayed where he was for a long time, letting the adrenaline drain out of him. When he moved again, his hands were shaking. Night fell early in the valley. The shadows were deeper here. The air cooler. The silence heavier. Mercer followed a dry creek bed, using it as both cover and guide. He slipped once, splashing into a shallow pool, heart jumping at the sound. He waited, listening. Nothing. He kept moving. Near midnight, the radio crackled again. This time, it was clearer. A voice, faint, distorted, but unmistakably American. Mercer's chest tightened. He fumbled with the radio, fingers clumsy. He keyed the mic, whispered his call sign, repeated it again and again. The response came in fragments. Broken words. Coordinates he couldn't fully make out. Then silence. Mercer stared at the radio like it had betrayed him. But it was enough. They were looking. He wasn't a ghost yet. The 6th day was the worst. His leg had stiffened overnight. Fever burned through him. Every step sent a wave of nausea rolling through his gut. He fell more than once, skinning his hands, smearing blood across stone. He talked to himself now. Not madness. Focus. Just a voice to push back the silence. He counted steps. Set small goals. Reach that rock. That tree. That shadow. By late afternoon, he reached the base of the ridge. It loomed above him, steep and jagged, offering no easy path. Climbing it felt impossible. He sat at the bottom, back against the stone, and laughed softly. Of course it wouldn't be easy. As he rested, he heard something that didn't belong. A helicopter. Not close. Not yet. But real. Mercer struggled to his feet, scanning the sky through breaks in the rock. The sound faded, then returned, then faded again. Search pattern. He dug into his pack and pulled out the last thing he had worth using. A single smoke grenade. He'd been saving it, waiting for the right moment. This might be it, but using it now would expose him. Draw attention. Not just from above, from the ground. Mercer looked at the ridge, then at the sky. He made his choice. He began to climb. The ascent was brutal. He used hands and knees, teeth clenched, dragging his injured leg behind him. Rocks cut into his palms. Sweat soaked his uniform. His vision swam. Halfway up, he slipped. He slid several feet before slamming into a ledge, pain exploding through his body. He lay there, gasping, staring at the sky. The helicopter sound grew louder, closer. Mercer forced himself up one last time and reached the top just as the aircraft crested the horizon. He pulled the pin. The smoke bloomed thick and bright, a violent color against the muted earth, rising fast into the air. Mercer waved his arms, screaming though no sound came out. Gunfire erupted below him. Enemy fighters spilled from cover, shouting, firing wildly toward the ridge. Mercer dropped, crawling, dragging himself toward cover as rounds snapped past. The smoke poured upward, impossible to miss. The helicopter banked hard. It was coming in. Mercer pressed his face into the dirt, heart pounding, knowing this was the moment. Everything balanced on this ridge. Survival or silence. He tightened his grip on the rifle, lifted his head into the chaos, and prepared to fight for the last time if he had to. Determined that if he was going to be found, it would be on his feet, facing the sky, unbroken. The helicopter dropped low, rotors chopping the air into violence. Dust and smoke swirled together, turning the ridge into a living storm. The aircraft wobbled under incoming fire, tracers clawing up from the rocks below. The crew didn't hesitate. They leaned into it, aggressive, committed. Mercer crawled behind a slab of stone as rounds cracked past, biting into rock, throwing shards into his face. He felt one punch through his sleeve, hot and close, but it didn't slow him. He checked the smoke, still rising, still visible. The helicopter flared, nose dipping, door gun barking in controlled bursts. Enemy fighters scattered, some diving for cover, others frozen in disbelief. Mercer pushed himself up on one knee and waved again, every muscle screaming. He didn't care who saw him now. A rope dropped. It hit the rock hard and bounced. Mercer stared at it for half a second that felt unreal. Then the world snapped back into motion. He dragged himself forward, bullets snapping around him, hands slick with blood and dust. The rope swung just out of reach. He lunged, fingers brushing it, missing. Gunfire surged from below. The helicopter shifted, fighting the air, fighting gravity, fighting time. Mercer lunged again. This time, he caught it. Pain exploded through his body as the rope took his weight. His injured leg hung useless, fire tearing through it as he clung on with everything he had left. He wrapped the rope around his arm, teeth clenched so hard his jaw ached. He started pulling, inch by inch, vision narrowing, the sound of the world fading to the roar of the rotors and the hammering of his heart. Rounds punched into the rock beside him. One tore through the rope below his feet, fibers snapping. Someone leaned out of the aircraft, arm extended, screaming something Mercer couldn't hear. He reached. Strong hands grabbed his vest and hauled. For a moment, Mercer was airborne, spinning, the ground falling away beneath him. Then he was inside, dragged onto the metal floor as the helicopter surged upward. The door slammed shut. The noise dropped to a dull roar. Mercer lay there, chest heaving, staring at the ceiling, unable to move. Blood pooled beneath his leg. His hands shook violently. Someone pressed down on his shoulder. Another voice cut through the haze, calm, focused. He was safe. The helicopter banked hard and raced away from the ridge as explosions blossomed behind them. Mercer didn't look back. He closed his eyes. He woke up hours later. Light filtered in softly. The air smelled clean. Sterile. Wrong. In a good way. His leg was wrapped tight. Tubes ran from his arm. Machines hummed quietly nearby. Mercer turned his head and saw familiar shapes. His team. Not all of them, but enough. They stood near the doorway, tired, dirty, eyes locked on him like they weren't sure he was real. No one spoke. They didn't need to. One of them nodded. That was enough. Mercer swallowed, throat dry, and let his head sink back into the pillow. The weight he'd been carrying for days finally loosened its grip. Later, when the pain dulled and the room grew quiet, Mercer stared at the ceiling and replayed it all. The gunfire, the silence, the nights alone, with nothing but his thoughts, and the sound of his own breathing. He thought about how close he'd come to stopping, how easy it would have been to lie down and let the world move on without him. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired, but underneath the exhaustion was something solid. He hadn't quit. Weeks passed. Mercer learned to walk again. Slowly, painfully, one step at a time. He learned how much strength it took to rebuild something that had been broken. The team visited when they could. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. The quiet was comfortable. No one said the word left behind. They didn't have to. Mercer knew the truth. Missions move fast. Decisions are made in seconds. Sometimes the cost isn't clear until later. What mattered was what came after. One evening, long after the scars had settled into his skin, Mercer stood alone outside, watching the sun dip low. The sky burned orange and red, peaceful in a way that felt unreal. He breathed in deeply. He was still here. Not because he was the strongest, not because he was lucky, but because when everything was stripped away, when the radio went silent, when the night closed in, when the world told him it was over, he chose to keep moving. He chose to survive, and somewhere out there, in the dust and darkness, that choice still mattered. Because being left behind didn't break him, it revealed him.